In the aftermath of the Korean War, South Korea saw rapid urbanization as large cities like Busan grew dramatically. Refugees and displaced people flooded into cities, with many living in poverty and working odd jobs. Housing and infrastructure could not manage the influx of these so-called vagrants. The government was put under pressure to do something about the rising issue. Initially relying heavily on foreign aid, they lacked the resources to address the issue appropriately, which continued for over a decade. In 1961, after Pak Chung-hee's military coup, the regime began forcibly detaining thousands of vagrants, viewing them as symbols of poverty and disorder. The government established detention facilities for the homeless, orphans, and other underprivileged groups considered undesirable. The crackdown intensified under Chun Doo-hwan's regime, particularly as the 1988 Seoul Olympics approached, with the number of incarcerated vagrants rising significantly. Of all of the detention facilities established, one in particular has gone on to become the most notorious, often dubbed Korea's Auschwitz: Brothers' Home. Over 40,000 individuals were confined there between 1975 and 1987, enduring extreme violence, neglect, and human rights abuses. Many died or suffered physical and sexual violence, and the trauma endured by survivors continues to affect them today. Brothers' Home was officially designated as a welfare facility, its primary purpose to help and protect impoverished and orphaned children, as well as the homeless. Some people were lured into the institution with promises of food, shelter, and a chance to escape their poverty-stricken lives. Many, however, were arrested and forced into the facility by the police. Even regular South Korean children, who were not homeless, were not safe from being detained and sent to Brothers' Home. One such example is that of On Sung-on, a first-year middle school student. He was stopped by the police on his way home for wearing inappropriate clothes. After dragging the boy into a police station, the officer accused Sung-un of theft after finding bread and milk in his bag. A confession was out of the boy, and then he was sent to Brothers' Home in a van. This was not an isolated incident, as many individuals, including ordinary citizens, were forcibly detained by the police or Brothers' Home staff. These detentions were illegal under existing Korean law, which required consent from the detainee and a notification of their relatives, procedures that were rarely followed. The situation worsened in 1975 when the Ministry of Home Affairs issued Directive Number 410, which enabled the police and public officials to crack down on perceived vagrancy and send detainees to group residential facilities like Brothers' Home. The police and government either ignored or even encouraged these unlawful actions, allowing Brothers' Home to operate with impunity. Overcrowding, beatings, forced labor, abuse, and were rife at Brothers' Home. There was also a lack of basic amenities and food, leading to starvation. The facility's isolation made escape nearly impossible. The management of Brothers' Home relied on a violent system of inmate leadership and hierarchy. Inmates in leadership positions used brutality to enforce compliance, often and beating new inmates. Collective punishment was common, and severe beatings were inflicted on those who made mistakes or failed to follow orders. The violence, coupled with poor conditions, resulted in numerous deaths, many of which were covered up by the facility's management. The facility also exploited inmate labor for profit. Under the guise of vocational training, inmates worked for small businesses, producing goods such as shoes and fishing tackle, and even working to extend the facility itself. The government's self-sufficiency policies, which aimed to alleviate poverty, enabled the facility to capitalize on this forced labor. Additionally, rumors of chemical restraint surfaced, with inmates being forcibly medicated with psychotropic drugs, possibly to control them or incapacitate them. In late 1986, the human rights violations at Brothers Home came to light. The investigation uncovered widespread corruption and abuse, but the government, under Chun Doo-hwan's military dictatorship, worked to downplay the case due to growing pressure for democratization. Despite initially seeking a 15-year sentence for Park In-gun, the facility's director, political interference led to a reduced sentence of just 2.5 years. Public attention shifted after the 1987 death of a student at the hands of police and the June Democratic Uprising, leading to decreased focus on Brothers Home. In response to the scandal, the government released most of the inmates, but without offering apologies, financial aid, or support. About 700 inmates were transferred to other facilities. Efforts by former detainees to expose the abuses were suppressed by city authorities, who pressured them to withdraw complaints or lawsuits. There are indications that government agencies, including the National Intelligence Service, may have been involved in efforts to silence victims, though direct evidence is lacking. Though the case initially sparked outrage, it was effectively buried by the Chun regime. In the years following, the facility was closed and later sold to a construction company in 1995, with the Busan city government failing to address the wrongful gain or provide restitution. The land was redeveloped into an apartment complex, during which human remains were discovered but never investigated. Survivors received no compensation and continued to suffer in isolation, while the perpetrators faced no meaningful punishment. Let's address the social media elephant in the room. Despite some unsettling similarities, such as poor people being taken advantage of and prisoner mistreatment, there is really very little connection to the hit Netflix show Squid Game. Brothers Home did not inspire Squid Game. The show's creator, Hwang Dong-hyuk, has made it clear that his personal struggles in the entertainment industry, combined with his reflections on the intense competition and economic inequalities within modern Korean society, are what inspired the show. He has also cited Battle Royale and Liar Game as inspirations. There is no real-life Squid Game, as many Reels and TikToks are claiming. Of course, it makes for good clickbait and engagement, but I believe we should reject this in favor of searching out the truth. To call Brothers Home the real-life Squid Game would be a disservice to all those who really suffered and died. I decided to uncover the truth myself and reflect on a very true and depressing part of human history. The exact number of people who died at Brothers Home is unclear. It is a dark part of human history that continues to haunt South Korean society, and its legacy lives on as a chilling reminder of the dehumanizing forces at work in any system that allows such exploitation, and the systemic abuse that can take place when society's most desperate individuals are treated as disposable. The survivors are still fighting for justice and recognition to this day.